Okay, so today we're going to take a look and review at multiplying with fractions and then also introduce the use of negatives when working with fractions. First vocabulary word that we are going to use today is reciprocal. A reciprocal is often used when we are talking about specifically fraction operations involving division. And a reciprocal is simply the inverse or flip of a value or number. So for example, if we had the fraction 3/4, its reciprocal is 4/3. These are also called multiplicative inverses because when you multiply them together, they equal 1. Another example, if we had the number 2, its reciprocal becomes 1/2 because remember all whole numbers are written over 1. All right, so to quickly review multiplying, remember that when we multiply fractions, any mixed number will be written as an improper fraction. So that would be our first step. If there were any mixed numbers, we would change it to an improper fraction. And then the great thing about multiplying is we just multiply straight across. So numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator. And then as always, because we're talking about fractions, we want to simplify if necessary. And as a side note, we want to remember that any whole numbers will always go over 1. So let's look at some examples. All right, so if we have -2 times 1/7, this is the opposite of two groups of 1/7 if you go back to what we did when we originally multiplied integers. I'm going to take my whole number and write it over 1. And now I'm simply going to multiply across. Now with the negatives, they can go in either the numerator, the denominator, or kind of out front. A lot of times what I suggest doing is just ignore any negative signs, multiply the numbers, and then figure out your negative sign in the end. So I'm just going to do 2 times 1, which is 2. And then I'm going to do 1 times 7, which is 7. And now I'm going to look. I have a negative times a positive, so my answer is going to be a negative. So my answer would be -2/7, which could also be written this way, or could look like that with the negative on the bottom. All of those are equivalent. All right, so our next one, we are just going to multiply across. So I'm going to start with 4 times 3, which is 12. And then I'm going to multiply across with my denominators, which is 5 times 8, which is 40. And then in this case, I'm going to look, because I know I can simplify it. Both of these have a common factor of 4. So 12 divided by 4 is 3. 40 divided by 4 is 10. There are no more common factors. Now I'm going to go back. I have a positive times a positive, so my answer will stay positive. On the last one, I have my mixed numbers. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite both of my mixed numbers as an improper fraction. Once again, I'm just going to go ahead and ignore those negative signs until the end. As a review, remember when we make mixed numbers into improper fractions, I'm going to take the denominator times the numerator. So in this case, I have 2 wholes, each cut into 4. So 2 times 4 is 8, plus 3 more pieces, which makes this 11/4. And then I'm going to do 1 pie cut into 3 pieces, which is 3 slices, plus 1 more, so 4/3. Multiply across, so 11 times 4 is 44. 4 times 3 is 12. I'm okay with you leaving it as an improper fraction, but this one can be simplified. Once again, we have that common factor of 4. So once we do that, our numerator becomes 11, our denominator becomes 3. Now I'm going to go back and look at my negatives. Here I had a negative times a negative, so I know my answer will be a positive 11/3. If the answer required you to change it back into a mixed number, or if you wanted to, just remember we're going to take that numerator, which is 11, divide it by our denominator, which is 3. 3 goes into 11 3 times, which is 9, leaving us with a remainder of 2. So this could also be 3 2/3. But like I said, for the most part, we're going to keep it as an improper fraction because we can do everything with improper fractions. All right, division works very similarly to multiplication. Once again, we're going to write any mixed numbers as improper fractions. Just makes our life easier. Now, the thing that's different about division is we are always going to keep the first value or the first number the same. Then, as a review, we're going to change the multiplication, or not the multiplication, the division to multiplication, kind of like when we change subtraction to addition. And then we're going to use the reciprocal of the second number. And then once we're done with all that, we're going to multiply across, just like we did with multiplication. And then, as a side note, remember to simplify. What this basically means is that when we divide by a number, we can multiply by the reciprocal and we get the same value. So thinking about this, if I take 10 and I'm dividing it into halves, so say I had 10 circles, 5, right? And I'm dividing it into halves. So now I'm going to cut each of these into halves. What was 1 now becomes 2. So this is equivalent to also taking 10 times the reciprocal of 1/2, which happens to be 2/1 or 2. And that's another way that we can get our answer of 20. So here we're going to start with our 3. Whole numbers are going to go over 1. We're going to change our division to that multiplication, and then we're going to go ahead and flip this fraction to its reciprocal. In this case, it's going to be -3/2. And now we're going to do like we did above. So here we have 3 times 3, which is 9. 1 times 2 is 2. This cannot be simplified. I have a positive times a negative, so my answer is going to be -9/2. Why don't you pause the video and try the next one on your own, and then see how you do. All right, remember we're going to keep that first value the same, so it's going to stay -3/4. Change our division to multiplication, and now we're going to flip our second fraction, so 3/5 becomes 5/3. It's still going to stay a negative. 3 times 5 is 15. 4 times 3 is 12. These have a common factor of 3, so I'm going to simplify this. 15 divided by 3 is 5. 12 divided by 3 is 4. I have a negative times a negative, so my answer is going to be a positive. All right. Last one, we have our mixed number, so we're going to change that first. 4 times 2 is 8, plus 1 is 9. So this is going to be 9/4 because we're going to keep the first value as it is. Multiply, we're going to flip our second one. 9 times 8 is 72. 4 times 5 is 20. These can both be divided by 4. 72 divided by 4 is 18. 20 divided by 4 is 5. That can't be simplified anymore. I have a positive times a negative, so my answer is going to be -18/5. So things to remember, right? I would say that the rules are the same as integers, and that with division, right, to multiplying by the reciprocal. You will often hear people kind of use the acronym kind of KFC, which means with division, we're in a, or not KFC, KCF, not to be confused with KFC, which is going to be keep the first, change division, and then flip the second fraction. So if that's something that would be helpful to you, it's another way that you could look at it.